But I do want to educate, teach in the classroom. That's my ultimate goal. The anti-Semitism now it's the song remains the same. I mean, people, the only difference between what happened 60, 80, 100 years ago is different ways that people maim, torture, persecute, kill other people, and that's really, it's just where have we been the last 80, 100 years? Why is the Holocaust still being denied? 10% of my proceeds, by the way, go to the Holocaust Museum in DC. That's ongoing. That's in my trust. So it's a win-win. You buy my book, you read about it, you'll understand one person's viewpoint on anti-Semitism and the horrors and the history.
We'll talk about this and much more today. Welcome to a Writer's Day podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a Writer's Day podcast. My name is Ruth Douthit, and I started this podcast in 2019 because I wanted to share all that I've learned about the writing process, the writing business, but also I wanted to interview amazing best-selling authors on my podcast. So welcome. And if you liked today's episode, please consider following me over at Spotify, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and let me know what you think of today's episode. And be sure and head over to artbyruth.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter to learn more about me and see my artwork there and my latest book. You can learn more about my upcoming release of Fatal Truth. It releases July 28th. That's just right around the corner. And it's available for pre-order right now over at Amazon. So head over to artbyruth.com today and get a free novella. That's right, my book, The Letter Opener. I will send you a copy of it if you sign up for my newsletter today. Robert Wolf, MD, is a neuroradiologist who attended the University of Michigan Medical School, and he was a doctor for 40 years, retired now, and decided to write his father's story about his time in a labor camp during World War II and how he escaped. And he also writes about, what happened to his grandparents, how they died at Auschwitz, and what happened during the brutal attack of Hungary and how the Jews were led off to the concentration camps. You're thinking, oh, this is a downer. I don't want to listen to this. No, I'm serious. It is an incredible story. I can hardly wait to read the book. And so Robert is here to talk about this amazing story, how it came to be. It's called Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. Those of you who know me, if you've been listening a long time, you know I love World War II history, so I could not wait to talk with Robert. So you know the drill. Grab your favorite beverage, a comfortable chair, kick back and relax as we listen to Robert J. Wolf talk about his book. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Robert Wolf with me here today to talk about his book. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Well, thanks for having me, Ruth. I much appreciated. I'm honored and privileged to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course, yes. Well, why don't you start off by telling my listeners a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about your book.
Well, I'm Rob Wolf. I'm a doctor. I'm a neuroradiologist. I just retired about a year and a half ago from practice. I've been in the business for 35 years, 44 years all in when you can include college, medical school internship. So 44 years of sweat. But I've just retired from that. I was born in Detroit, raised in Michigan. I've lived half my life in Michigan and half my life in New England, depending on where the jobs were and who I married. And now I've been in Southern Florida for about 6 years, actually 7 years now. I got here right before the coronavirus epidemic. So I've got a lot of interests. The book I wrote about it's a wonderful book, but it's somewhat maudlin because it does cover anti-Semitism and a lot of sad stories. But I am a happy guy. I like comedy and I like movies and I like sports and music. I'm a foodie. I like golf. I like fitness, nutrition, history, investing, travel. So I do have a lot of interests too, besides what we're doing here, and of course, science and medicine.
Well, that's wonderful. Wow, 44 years
It's a
in
long
the
stretch.
medical industry. Yeah, my goodness. Well, I always like asking people the why question. Why did you want to become a doctor?
Well, my dad was my hero growing up, even before I knew everything that happened to him back in the day in Hungary. So Ninth grade was probably the magic number. I always admired my dad and my mom, of course, but my dad used to take me on rounds with him. We traipsed through the ER. He'd say hi to everybody. He loved what he
Mhm.
did, delivering babies. Dad was an OBGYN, by the way. Delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area. Redemption, a form of redemption, not complete redemption for everything that the Jews and he had to go through, but still some type of. But he loved his work, so I used to follow him, and he'd come into the ER, say hi to everybody, the janitors, the secretaries, the other doctors, the nurses, and I'd wait for him in the doctor's lounge. He'd take me to lunch, and in ninth grade, I took biology, and watching what he was doing and enjoying the subject matter in biology more than any other subject, I was destined to go into medicine as well.
Oh,
And
that's
never, of course, we all want to do things like be a point guard for the Pistons or wide receivers for the Lions. Not necessarily those teams back in the day, but for me, a sports announcer, that kind of thing. Batman when you're really young, but being a doctor was a nice challenging thing, and I went with it.
oh man, yeah, talk about challenging. Oh my goodness. Well, that is admirable to want to follow in your dad's footsteps. Now, before we get into talking about this book and your dad's story, um, I love studying World War II history. It's just such an amazing story of absolute, evil being fought by the good guys. And I didn't really understand the plight of the Hungarian Jews, though, until I saw a documentary about it. And then I went to Hungary, to Budapest myself, and went to some of the museums there. So when was it that you, though, became aware of the Hungarian Jews and your dad's story?
Well, kudos for you for following all that. And yeah, World War II, probably near half the book is about World War II, of course, but a different angle. We're talking about a forced labor camp. Um, Yeah, my mom and dad were Holocaust educators all their lives, but the first half of my life I wasn't really that interested in it, mostly because I was pre-med and then med, practicing, busy with work, family, that kind of thing. I did read my dad's story once. It was basically paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disk. At the
Mhm.
point of manuscript, I read it back then 30. I didn't think much of it. I remember his first escape, but I don't remember much of his other three escapes. He was a four-time escape artist
Mhm.
and the 20 miracles in his book as well. It just sort of passed me by. But my dad passed away in 1997, unfortunately. My mom passed away in 2016, and a historian friend of mine of the family said, "You've got to look at this disc and read this." And I didn't think much of it at the time, but a year went by. I took care of my mom's affairs. Then another year, retired. Then a year later, I went back to work as a radiologist, helping out a friend part time. Never burn your bridges. There's the lesson there. And that brought me to the book. So I was reading cases, ultrasound and x-ray, and two screen readings, the list of the patients. And on the right are the images. And between cases, the left was my dad's story, now on disc, like I said. And the right was me dictating it, changing his autobiography into a biography. And that's when it really I got the zap. I got the zap about anti-Semitism, all the messages in the story, World War II, the communists taking over
Mhm.
Hungary after World War II, on and on. And it was so inspiring. I was so captivated that I just couldn't leave it on a disc. I couldn't leave it on a computer. I wanted to share it with people, with the world. And so I didn't know much about Hungarian history either, other than bits and pieces my parents told me over the years. And like you, I went to Hungary when I was in 11th grade, but I was so young and so homesick that it didn't really affect me like it would now if I went back.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, I stood in Hero Square where Hitler gave his big speech there when they conquered, and then later on when Stalin and his cronies took over, did a big speech there as well.
Frick them both. It always ends up badly for these guys, right?
Yeah, that's right. Thank the Lord. Well, so let's talk about your book, Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. Tell us about this story and about your grandparents and all that you learned.
Well, I can't do all that you learned in 20 minutes or half an hour or even 400 pages, but I did learn quite a bit. So the book, Not a Real Enemy, The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom, is the biography of my dad, literally converted from all of his memoirs. He had so many memoirs that it was really an autobiography. it wasn't word for word, but we went from first person to third person and did all the homework about the history and the culture at the time and all of that. It's a history book. It covers the end of World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Good photo of that I'm looking at that you're showing
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
It was tanks and Hungarians taking over tanks and snipers shooting at tanks was pretty much the short-lived Hungarian Revolution. But so the end of World War II, the end of Hungarian Revolution of 56, little known Hungary. It's an adventure. My dad was a four-time escape artist. Like I said, twice from forced labor camp in Nazi Hungary and twice under communist Hungary. He even missed an
Wow.
escape. It's another thing we could talk about, and lucky that he did. And like I said, 20 miracles in the book. And it's the triumphs and tragedies of my dad's family and friends and loved ones, including his parents, who unfortunately perished at Auschwitz. And a
Hmm.
miracle was how he found out months after the war from an eyewitness what actually happened to them and how long they were there, so their actual whereabouts. And my dad's father was a dentist. He was actually a captain on a Red Cross ship in World War I in the Black Sea, and a real threat to society. And my mom's grandfather was a rabbi, and he perished at Auschwitz too. So real threats to society. And of course, we talk about the Hungarians that perished. 565,000 is the last number I saw out of about
Wow.
825,000. So most of the Hungarian population was decimated, and it was relatively late in the war, mostly 1943, 44, especially.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize is it was something that Hitler wanted to do, even though he knew he was pretty much losing the war. He didn't care. He wanted to go into Hungary with the sole purpose of slaughtering the Jewish people there.
It's
I
funny you
mean,
say that because I've read in this journey here, oh, geez, it's been like a 7 or 8 year journey now. But I've read along the way that, yeah, when the Nazis were losing the war, which they were at that point, and 1942 was another good example, they went out of their way to systematically kill the Jewish people to eradicate the population. Maybe it was a secret, a personal victory or a way of feeling like they were victorious in some way, killing innocent people that were unarmed while they were getting their ass kicked by the Allies.
hmm
So
hmm
no doubt about it was
It,
sort of
yeah,
uh,
I mean, it
yeah,
was just pure
pure evil.
evil. When I went into they have an incredible museum there, the House of Horrors, they call it, and it was the house that Hitler and his Nazi leaders took over when they, stormed Budapest. And now it's a museum, and you go through and you see the photographs, you see what they did, you see them marching in. And yeah, it was only for pure evil reasons, just to kill the Jewish people. He had no need for the land he was losing. He knew that, but he just wanted to wipe out these poor people. And yeah, I've been to Auschwitz and saw the horrors there. As you were doing the research and rewriting your father's words, were you able to track down your grandparents and find out what happened to them?
Well, my mom had it. Well, I can't say less harrowing. My mom was 11 years younger than my dad. So when my
Mm,
dad was at forced labor camp and his parents taken away and perished at Auschwitz, my mom was my dad was it was 1943, 44. So my dad was about 21, which made my mom about 10 or 11. And
okay.
mostly she was in hiding with her mom, her grandmother, sometimes her grandfather and uncle. So either out in farms in remote rural areas, sometimes in Budapest, but they had to change their from time to time and hide. So she must have been scared to death. I can't imagine living under those circumstances either, but a little less harrowing on a day-to-day basis than what my dad had to do. My mom kind of documented what happened to her grandfather, of course. I don't remember much about her grandmother. And then my dad's parents, of course, perished at Auschwitz at 50. The grandparents had never met. And
Mm,
there is a little bit about my dad's father's brothers and sisters, but I'll tell you, they were very quiet family. They were very much to themselves. They didn't seem like they were very tight or close. They had some troublemakers in the family, flirts. My dad didn't. He pieced together a few things about as a child what he knew about his father's family and his mother's family was even more separated from her. So
mm,
basically, my dad's parents were by themselves until they had my father. Very, very isolated, I guess is the right word. And part of it was being Jewish, being afraid to congregate, I suppose. I mean, and having to move from point A to point B to point C, like Transylvania. They were in Romania, Transylvania. They moved back to Hungary. not knowing where they'd be safe, but knowing that they were more comfortable in Mother Hungary, their native land, than they would have been in some foreign country, with or without wars.
Okay. Tell us about the escaping of the Nazis. How did that happen?
Well, the one thing, so the Nazis did sort of occupy Hungary. They did, it wasn't an all-out war. I mean, it was like a 10-minute war. We're talking about horseback versus tanks. So
Hmm.
about as fair as the Hungarian Revolution in 56. But so Hungary was occupied, of course, pretty early on. Um, but of course, as we said, the systemic genocide didn't come until later in the war. And of course, the forced labor camps were around, slave labor camps. But for my dad, it didn't exist until it was October 1943 into 1944, months at a time. They suffered. They were beaten. They were urinated on. They starved. They had malnutrition. My dad had a foot infection. He had spinal injuries, food poisoning, lice. All these things. I mean, it's remarkable how these guys survived. And by the way, only 5% of forced laborers survived, and they were treated as
Hmm.
prisoners of war. So my dad and his friend Frank, it's towards the end of the war, as far as the news that they heard, not much news when you're out in the middle of nowhere, but they were in the mountains. They were out in the middle of nowhere, and they decided they only had a few day window, a 2 or 3 day window to try to escape because they didn't know if they were on a death march. They didn't know if the Nazis were going to win or if the Russians were going to win. Either way, it didn't sound good to the Jewish men, especially if the Nazis won. So they didn't know whether to go to Austria, to stay in Hungary, and they didn't know where they were at all anyway. So boom, they escaped. They were at the back of the line. It was about dusk, and boom, they took off in the middle of nowhere. A third guy who had not plotted to do this kind of followed them along and got caught. And meanwhile, my dad and his friend Frank were hiding in the thicket, freezing and worried about bears and wolves. And but they'd rather take their chances with that than getting beaten or caught by the guards, and who knows, maybe even assassinated for trying to escape. But they got away, and talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. They had to go down the mountain, uncharted territory, find railroad tracks, hike their way back to Budapest, which they did. Of course, hiding from trains and any sign of civilization, because who knows how they would have gotten treated.
Hmm.
And then not knowing where your next meal was going to be, your next place to sleep, your next job, where you're going to get money. So they managed to do it. They get into Budapest. They actually find comfort for a while in a little like a halfway house, but it was for a former Jewish military man. It's just amazing how they fell on that. And the job that they had was maybe clean up and prepare food, much easier than what they had in the forced labor camp. And then somehow that house was discovered, so they all had to split. And so my dad and his friend Frank were on the run again. Some truck driver offers to take them to where they needed to go, but he double crosses them, takes them to what they called the dog pound in downtown Budapest, across Nazi headquarters. Within a day or two, they escaped there too. They what guts they had, what courage.
Yeah.
Split second timing, a lot of luck. They caught the streetcar at the right time. They were between guards at the right time, and just kind of ran out the front door after getting cigarettes for one of the officers there. So a pack of cigarettes actually saved their life, if you can believe it,
Yeah.
and a comic.
Wow.
So that was maybe not as harrowing as the first escape, but damn dangerous and damn amazing. Like you can't imagine this. You can't make this stuff up.
I know. It sounds like a movie. Oh
It's
my
well,
goodness.
it's funny you say. We're working on a documentary now. We're working on a short, like a 20-minute documentary covering
Okay.
a lot of this. But let's see what that. And then his third and fourth escape. His third, he was a med student. He got wanted to get not out of communist Hungary, and just decided to take off one day. And he made it. I mean, he got to Austria. He was arguing with an armed Russian soldier, pretending that he was going to be cleaning the X-ray equipment. Ironically, since I'm a radiologist, and he got through. I mean, he bluffed his way through it, but changed his mind, returned back to Hungary for fear of reprisal, finished med school, and then finally in 56, when he was with my mom, they escaped after the end of the Hungarian Revolution, late fall, early winter, and they were frontliners during that 2 week war where 3,000 people died. My dad was an OBGYN doubling down as a trauma surgeon, and my mom was a med student at the time. She never finished, unfortunately for her, and she ran the blood bank. So they were busy
Wow.
people in the community, but they had had enough. The Nazis and the communists and two wars. Just it was too much.
I bet. How did they make it to the United States?
Well, that's part two. That would be book two. The book ends in Vienna, where my mom meets her stepfather. And
Oh.
part two would be my dad's autobiography goes well into the 70s. But yeah, they ended up in, ironically, the western part of Germany, and they took a used American military boat that transported all the refugees to Ellis Island. And so they end up in New York City. Met my mom's real dad. Actually, getting their card and their paperwork done would seem relatively easy. And they had a flat tire, which I think that would have been a great way to end the book too. Is just look at the flat tire and just start laughing because everything they went through. God forbid we get a flat tire on a highway around here. It's like it ruins the day. Of course it does, but nothing like everything they went through. But
Yeah.
and then they ended up in Providence, Rhode Island with her father and estranged second wife. Her parents got divorced to save their family, if you can believe that. They got divorced and split into two different spots. Her father ended up in London and then California, and her mother ended up in Israel, and they both got remarried. So Providence was tough for them. They barely spoke the language and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know where they were going. And my dad got a residency in Boston at the Beth Israel, a Harvard affiliate, which is amazing because he could still barely speak English. So he had to redo his residency, and he did it while taking elementary school and high school English at local schools. So kudos to him for doing that. I can't imagine trying to do a residency and barely knowing the language. I mean,
Wow.
so that was pretty cool. And getting into Harvard, which I couldn't get into Harvard, any school, any program, in any specialty. I don't think it's so competitive. So good for him.
Wow, it just shows the resilience
Very much.
of them, right? And the other survivors, when you read about their stories, I mean, so resilient. Oh my goodness. You're right. I mean, we all would just curl up into a fetal position if anything like that happened to us. But
Exactly.
my
Well, that's
goodness.
part of the lesson. That's part of what I
Mhm.
say is I don't know how I could survive this and, not have PTSD like my dad didn't, and be jovial and jolly and just move on with your life. Not a lot of people, not everybody can do that, not everybody can share the stories. And that's another important point. And I understand that. I mean, it's so harrowing that, I get it. But my mom and
Yeah,
dad just, they had to. And so did I.
you're right. They had to. It's not like they had a choice. They had to keep functioning, keep going forward. It must be concerning to you that we're starting to see a rise of anti-Semitism throughout Europe again, and even now in the United States. What's the hope that you have with putting this book out there? What's the message or life lessons you want people to take away from this book?
Well, I have good days and bad days with this business. You're an author too. Congratulations and good luck on your upcoming book, by the way.
Thank
And I
you.
hope it goes well for you. You're writing about great stuff that people love to read, and I wish you the best on that. Um, Anti-Semitism. Some days I wake up and say, you know what? Nobody gives a bleep about anti-Semitism, and I mean it because it's
Hmm.
apathy. The opposite of love is not hate. A friend of mine said the opposite of love is fear, and to me, the opposite of love is apathy. The opposite of love
Hmm.
is indifference, and that's kind of where I'm at some days. But I do want to educate, teach in the classroom. That's my ultimate goal. The anti-Semitism now is it's the song remains the same. I mean, the only difference between what happened 60, 80, 100 years ago is different ways that people maim, torture, persecute, kill other people, and that's really it's just so where have we been the last 80, 100 years? Why is the Holocaust still being denied? And so I want to educate people. I've done this, I've just done my 200th program, 130th podcast. I've done, I don't know, 46 or 47 book presentations and about 26, 27 radio and TV interviews. So I don't say no to anything. I've had the privilege of doing 4 book signings at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C., the mothership.
Wow.
The books in 30 libraries, including Johns Hopkins, the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem.
Hmm.
It's in the Yale system. It's in a lot of Emory. It's in a lot of prestigious. And so come invite me. I do programs. I travel. I'll do it from home, and it's all to educate. And
That's
10% of
wonderful.
my proceeds, by the way, go to the Holocaust Museum in D.C. That's ongoing. That's in my trust. So it's a win-win. You buy my book, you read about it, you'll understand one person's viewpoint on anti-Semitism and the horrors and the history in his little corner. But also, money goes to the community. Money goes to the museum that also teaches about genocide and the perils of history repeating itself. So, in a lot of ways, I'm still trying to educate, even locally. I bring books with me to the restaurants, and I attract interest, and people ask, and it's good when I get that. It's very fickle business, as you know, though. For every success, you get 10 failures or 20 failures. You get
Sure.
ghosted, or the budget's off, or we're redoing our museum, or people forget, or again, there's just apathy. It doesn't, if we had Hamas tanks and armored trucks and soldiers marching in the streets here in Miami, or in your neighborhood, Detroit
Hmm.
or New York, then people might stand up and take notice. But if it doesn't affect them on a day-to-day basis, then it's harder to hit home with it for people.
That's true. And it is, yeah, it's mind blowing to me that there are people out there who deny it or they say, oh, Hitler didn't do enough. He should have done more. And when I hear that, I just cringe. And I really
Big
think
time.
it should be required of every human being on the planet to tour Auschwitz and Dachau and some of the other camps because it really becomes so real to you. It's no longer in the history books. You're actually right there, seeing everything. And my one friend who was a Holocaust denier said, well, how can you even trust that any of that stuff that's in the museum is real? I said, are you kidding me? The Nazis, their pride is what was their downfall. They were so meticulous in every single detail. They had books upon books upon books, filled ledgers, every single thing that they could write down. And it was all pride. They wanted to record everything, they wanted bragging rights. And I said, and it all came back to haunt them because all those ledgers, all those books are there in all these museums. And you can see for yourself that
Well,
it
you
happened.
know your
It
history.
happened.
You know your history. Absolutely. You know your history. They were meticulous. I have some very in this business, in this journey, I've got about 20,000 photos in my phone, and I've collected quite a few that are really, really disturbing. A pile of
Mm-hmm.
bodies that General
Yeah.
Eisenhower is looking at. The
Mm-hmm.
last survivor at Vilna about to be shot, surrounded by a bunch of Nazis. And they took these photos and they sent them home. And this is what we're doing. We're exterminating this lesser population, and uh, it's very sad. It's hard to
It
deny.
is.
And I say, look, if whether you're Christian or Jewish, I'm not going to deny the New Testament because I believe in the Old Testament. The Old Testament was established, Jewish religion was established when Christianity came out. But I'm not going to deny the Hindu religion or Buddhism because I don't know enough about it. And you can't say the Old Testament is right and the New Testament is wrong, or history from this 100-year period is wrong, but 500 years ago or 2,000 years ago was correct. You can't just say, pick and choose what's accurate, what's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's so well documented. And people deny 911 anymore. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's
you
true.
got to be kidding me. 911 is an attack against the United States. So Jews died, Hindus died, Muslims, African Americans, Asians,
Mm-hmm.
visitors, business people. It was a devastating attack. And I can't believe it is so well documented. And
I know.
I don't know. I mean,
Well,
this country hasn't had cohesiveness since 911 for one, but that was
mm-hmm.
short-lived, and World War II, but no
Yeah,
cohesiveness during the Korean War, the Vietnam, the coronavirus epidemic. It's just been we our cohesiveness as a country needs work.
that's true. And you're right. I mean, a book like this is so important. Your family stories need to be told. So I hope you're able to go into the schools. When I was a school teacher, I would invite Holocaust survivors to come speak to my students because I told my students this was in 2012 to 2016. And I told my students, you're probably the last generation to actually see Holocaust survivors because the speakers that we had, they were 4 or 5, 6 years old during the war. One man was 14 during the war, and I said, they're all gone now, and so you are probably the last generation to actually listen to Holocaust survivors, and they just couldn't believe it. And so now your book and other people's books, the true stories of the Jewish people who endured, they are so important. So thank you for recording this that we can learn from it. It's amazing.
I appreciate you saying that. There are a handful left. I mean, there's probably a few thousand left. One of them is a 100 or 101-year-old gentleman here in my community. I'm in a 55 and older community here near Fort Lauderdale, and he's still around. And
Wow.
he spoke last year, and he's also a
Oh,
drummer, so he played a couple of riffs with his drums, which was kind of cool. And they just celebrated his 100th birthday. So there are a few left, and that that's funny you bring that up because sometimes I don't get book presentations because people prefer first generation over second. So but they're not going to be around forever. Not that I want
that's
to kill
right.
people off,
No,
but if they're going to have second generation people convey the story, then I plan on doing it as long as I can. Like
good.
a good friend of mine said, if dad said that that's what happened, then that's what happened because he was a man of integrity, And we verified the history many
Good.
times over. The three professors that did our testimonials and a retired professor who worked at the Holocaust Museum in DC for many years. We had him read the history, verify, argue, edit, and we went accordingly. Uh,
Good.
it's as accurate as we can get it, plus personalized because of the miracles and also the persecution of the Jews and others by the communists, not just the Nazis.
Well, listeners, Not a Real Enemy is available in stores right now. So head over to your favorite store, Barnes and Noble or Amazon, wherever you get your books, and get your copy immediately and read it. And then read it, talk about with your family, talk about with your children. It's an important conversation that has to happen. And Robert, what's next for you coming down the road?
Well, I was just going to say about if you read the book, please, a review helps. Invite me
Yes,
to do a
yes.
podcast, a book presentation. I can't fight anti-Semitism alone, and this is my little corner of it. And I'm just trying to recruit people to help me to wrap our arms around the few that are not in the same page, that are not into family and love and our own country, for example. We don't have to all think the same, but anyway, that said, part two of the book would be one thing from Vienna, where they ended up, to the 1970s, where they finally got established and finally had a little bit of an easier life. That would be a book. The other one would be The Things They Don't Teach You in Med School, part autobiography, part humor, sort of like House of God, and then life's experiences and a lot of lessons for the kids, pre-med, med, good and bad. A lot of a lot of gratification in being a doctor, but there's a lot of work and there are a lot of you have bad days too. And we
Mhm.
talk about things like partnership tracks, investing, burnout, writing a book, all kinds of things like that. Pre-med, medical, the labs, medical school, the wards, internship, residency, partnership
Wow.
tracks. I think I mentioned that. The legal aspects, malpractice, all kinds of things like that. There's a lot of little chapters, but a lot of useful stuff that, yeah, maybe do want to go to med school, or maybe I don't want to go to med school, but with a couple of chuckles in between. And then the fourth book, and I don't know if I'm even going to get to book two because by far this book that I've done will have been the most important out of any of them. But the fourth book would be how to invest in a bear market. And I'm not at Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, but I guarantee I know more about saving, investing, the economy than probably 95% of Americans, especially younger Americans. So we would be talking about dividends reinvested, bond investing, real estate, uh, all kinds of things like that. I've subscribed to Barron's and Investors Business Daily, Value Line, CNBC every day. So I've got 30 years, 35 years of experience in that.
Wow.
And it would be a chapter in the book about the things they don't teach in med school, but it wouldn't be a big, thick book. I'm not Kramer. I mean, he's a machine and all these other supposed experts, but I think I know enough about the topic. But I'd have to lend some credibility, and it's not really in my wheelhouse. So that would be a fourth book. I'll be happy to get
Wow.
to a second book. It's a lot of work, as you know. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
it
details
is.
to it, tons of details. It's fun, but it's also work.
That is amazing. Wow, you are one busy person for being retired. You're awfully busy.
I know, right? Right?
But that's exciting. That's part of life, right? You're supposed to keep going. And but I thank you, Robert, for coming on my podcast today to talk about Not a Real Enemy and your parents and all that you do. It's so appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. You can find me across the board in socials, also robertjwolfmd.com. And I appreciate it, Ruth, and good luck with your new book, too. I hope New York Times bestseller and maybe someday mine, too. Schindler's List on steroids, but thank you for having me.
That was so amazing to talk to Dr. Robert J. Wolf about his book, Not a Real Enemy. So inspirational, isn't it? Oh my goodness. All that his father and his grandparents endured during World War II. Such a resilient people and very inspirational. So head over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, get your copy, and leave Robert a review. He would love to know what you think of the book. And head over to robertjwolfmd.com to read more about him. He has a blog there and all of his information about the book. Head over to robertjwolfmd.com today. And I thank you for listening. I hope that you've been inspired by this incredible story and how your nonfiction work can change lives. So if you feel the Lord tugging on your heart to write a nonfiction book about you or a family member, you must do it. Someone out there needs to read your story, so please consider it. And always keep going forward on your writing journey, one step at a time, overcoming those obstacles. And most importantly, I thank you for listening today. Until next time, God bless.